Okay. Good afternoon. It's good to have you here. And I welcome everyone on the internet as well. Before we begin, I would just like to touch on a couple of things that were discussed last week. Remember that an idea leaves not its source. Therefore, the visibility and tangibility of that idea, in other words, the recognizability of it by the mind that formed it, is not something different or separate from the source. It is the idea itself. It is such an ingrained habit to think that creation is something separate from its creator, like a clay pot is something different from the one who threw it, the one who formed it. It's such an ingrained habit that there's a tendency to think, when I spoke last week about the spring in the sprinkler head, as though that spring is an idea that was in the mind of the one who conceived of it, but that the spring in the sprinkler head is itself matter, or the same with the signal light at the intersection. But what I want you to understand is that when I'm talking about the spring and the signal light at the intersection, or the leaf, or the glass-topped table, I am saying that you are seeing right there an idea. It never left its source. It isn't a manifestation of an idea. It is the idea itself directly experienced. It is pure spirit. Likewise, there could be a tendency to think, when I spoke of the arteries that had become misshapen so that they blocked the flow of blood, that it was important to recognize that the artery is pure spirit, so that it wouldn't interfere with the blood that kept your material body functioning. Do you see what I'm saying? It's easy to be selective still and to say, okay, I'm going to see my arteries as spirit, but at the same time think that this will allow the blood in your body to circulate more freely, allowing for less stress, and therefore keeping your material body from dying. You see what I'm saying? The blood, the arteries, the veins, the corpuscles, all of it is an idea that never left its source, and therefore is an idea still, and therefore is pure spirit. When you hear the word manifestation translated into the meaning visibility and tangibility, or the experience of recognizability, manifestation is not something separate from the idea. It is the idea recognized. Don't leave any part of your experience of the world and universe outside of God by thinking that in any respect, any part of it is material and is influenceable by knowing the truth, or influenceable by calling it spirit. It is spirit and nothing else. Well, the thought can come up, well, why would God create a sprinkler head if grass is eternal? Why would it need to be watered? That's a human idea. That's a human concept. And therefore, in reality, there couldn't be a sprinkler head. That has to be part of the human dream. Well, I'm telling you that you're thinking too much. You don't know what it means yet. And that's exactly why I'm inviting you all to look at everything with innocent eyes, with freshness and without your pre-existing definitions. You don't know just how infinitely and wonderfully and uniquely and originally the wholeness of eternal being is manifest, is rendered visible, is rendered recognizable. So stop making snap judgments or assumptions that say, well, this couldn't be part of reality because blah, 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 blah. And be willing to assume that the blah, 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 blah that you follow, or that you follow the statement with, this couldn't be part of the kingdom of heaven, is the means you utilize to keep yourself locked into and limited by your love of giving definitions to everything, your love of determining by yourself what this part or that part or the other part of the kingdom of heaven is, and giving preference to your definition over the reality of it. Now, the second thing I want to comment on is that during the week, the question was presented, how much of reality spills over into our dream or your dream of reality? Again, this suggests a split that isn't there, as though you're having some sort of autonomous dream that is entirely different and separate from reality. When the fact is that your dream, every part of your dream, is based in reality. Your dream is nothing more than an altered perception of reality. It is reality perceived with a bias. You have not succeeded in going someplace like to sleep and having a dream that is entirely separate and apart from reality. What I am referring to as the dream is nothing more than a biased perception of reality. It's reality you're seeing unclearly. So reality doesn't spill over into your dream. It's what every single one of you is using as the basis for a biased, slanted, distorted perception that you're claiming is real. So, what does this mean? It means you don't have to wake up from the dream before you can see reality. Reality is what is in your face, as I've said over and over. Reality is what is confronting you at every instant, whether you Call it a rose or a glass-top table or the fabric of your pants or the hair on your head. Reality is what is confronting you. How you are perceiving it or misperceiving it is what constitutes the illusion, the dream. And because that's so, you don't have to wake up before you can see reality. You can start with what's right in front of your face and say, that's not matter. That's spirit. That isn't a manifestation of some act of creation. That is an idea that God is having at this instant. And that idea never left its source. And therefore, aside from my current perceptions, misperceptions of what it is, I choose to become undefended against experiencing this idea that never left its source and never became matter and is pure spirit and is embodying the will of God, the nature of God, the love of God at this very instant. I choose no longer to defend myself against experiencing that by having an opinion or a definition of my own. The expression of that desire to experience the truth of that rose, or whatever it might be, is the way you open up to God. It's the way you turn toward the altar. And it's the way you manage to let God register with you and yield to Him. Okay. Let's go into the book. Page 46. Judgment and the authority problem? Yes.
Judgment and the authority problem. We have already discussed the last judgment, but in insufficient detail. After the last judgment, there will be no more.
No more judgments. Continue.
Judgment is symbolic because beyond perception, there is no judgment. When the Bible says, "Judge not, that ye not be judged," it means that if you judge the reality of others, you will be unable to avoid judging your own.
It's a very simple fact. The same measuring stick you use to judge others, you judge yourself by. Absolutely. You do not have a different measuring stick for yourself, a better one, a more lenient one than you have for others.
The choice...
No, it's time to pass it on, yes.
The choice to judge rather than to know is the cause of the loss of peace.
To know what? To know the truth. To have the direct experience of what the Father is being there where the rose is. Continue.
Judgment is the process on which perception, but not knowledge, rests. I have discussed this before in terms of the selectivity of perception, pointing out that evaluation is its obvious prerequisite. Judgment always involves rejection. It never emphasizes only the positive aspects of what is judged, whether in you or in others. What has been perceived and rejected, or judged and found wanting, remains in your mind because it has been perceived. One of the illusions from which you suffer is the belief that what you judged against has no effect. This cannot be true unless you also believe that what you judged against does not exist. You evidently do not believe this, or you would not have judged against it. In the end, it does not matter whether your judgment is right or wrong. Either way, you are placing your belief in the unreal. This cannot be avoided in any type of judgment because it implies the belief that reality is yours to select from.
Indeed. The minute you look at that rose, or the minute you look at the spring in the sprinkler head, and you determine that it's matter, you determine that it has had its source in a material evolution or a mechanical process of manufacture, and you make commitment to that idea, that belief, you're choosing for the unreal. You're anchoring the unreal. And you are creating a temporary inability on your part, in your mind, to be an inability on your part, in your mind, to perceive what it really is. Now, when you say that the rose is alive and the spring in the sprinkler head is not, and that therefore the rose is a more valuable material object, you've made a judgment. If you say that the white rose to you is more beautiful than the red rose, you've made a judgment. But you know what? No matter how many judgments you make between objects in this so-called material world, it's meaningless, because you haven't made the one distinction that is essential to your salvation. And that distinction is not between objects, but it is the distinction in your mind that you have made that says, what I have determined a thing to be is what it is. And I choose to value it rather than the other choice that I have available to me, which is to inquire what it really is as God is being it. The moment you provide a definition for anything, an explanation, an understanding of it that wasn't derived from its source, which is God, you have made a distinction and a judgment, a value judgment. And that judgment has separated you from the experience of reality. That's the only distinction that needs to be made, because that distinction is the one which will allow you to make the choice for reality and get out of the bondage of the mutually agreed upon definitions that constituted your choice to be able to apparently be an authorizer in your own right. Let's continue.
You have no idea of the tremendous release and deep peace that comes from meeting yourself and your brothers totally without judgment. When you recognize what you are and what your brothers are, you will realize that judging them in any way is without meaning. In fact, their meaning is lost to you precisely because you are judging them.
And I would use a capital M there for meaning. In fact, their capital M meaning, their divine meaning, their real meaning is lost to you precisely because you are judging them. Continue.
All uncertainty comes from the belief that you are under the coercion of judgment. You do not need judgment to organize your life, and you certainly do not need it to organize yourself. In the presence of knowledge, all judgment is automatically suspended, and this is the process that enables recognition to replace perception.
Yes, it does. It also deprives you of the hit that you get from thinking that you can be the originator of an idea, the originator of a meaningful definition. It deflates the ego. It deflates the ego. Continue. Not yet.
Raj, can I make a comment too?
Not yet.
You are very fearful of everything you have perceived but have refused to accept. You believe that because you have refused to accept it, you have lost control over it. This is why you see it in nightmares or in pleasant disguises in what seem to be your happier dreams. Nothing that you have refused to accept can be brought into awareness. It is not dangerous in itself, but you have made it seem dangerous to you.
Yes, nothing that you have refused to accept can be brought into awareness. Your decisions, your use of your mind is absolute. So, what you have refused to accept, you will not experience. Now, you could say there are lots of things you have refused to accept. And psychology helps you go on an internal search to find out what those things are that you have refused to accept so that you can embrace them. But that's like going through all of your definitions, mutually agreed upon definitions of things like roses are more valuable than the spring in a sprinkler head, and helping you to stop making the judgment, help you to somehow re-embrace the spring in the sprinkler head as much as you do the rose. But you know what? If you manage to do that and you go on this internal hunt for all of the things you have refused to look at, and you manage to re-embrace them all without making judgments one over the other, you still haven't addressed the one fundamental thing that you rejected, which was that all of this, all of these things about which you have mutually agreed upon definitions are the visibility and tangibility of God. You have rejected the godness of them. And so, no matter how much you work at reducing the judgments you have for or against, the various things about which you have made up definitions that you are committed to, you still haven't done anything valuable. The one thing, you might say the cornerstone that the builders rejected, the builders of mutually agreed upon definitions, is that all is God, that all is Spirit. And that includes you, and your function is to be that consciousness which recognizes God in everything you see. Your function is to be that which glorifies God by recognizing the divinity of absolutely everyone and everything, including yourself. So when you reject the cornerstone, when you make the one simple rejection of the godness of everything, and then look at everything minus God and give your definitions to it all, no matter how many definitions you've given to it, and no matter how much work you do to bring your assessment of all of those things you've defined into perfect balance and into perfect equilibrium where you love and appreciate them all equally, you are still flat out in the dream. You are still flat out unconscious of the godness of it. You haven't brought God back into the picture. And yet, as I said earlier, you are using all that God is as the basis for creating the definitions you want to give to all that God is. So you're using reality to your own ends while ignoring what reality is and where you fit into it. And rather than witnessing to God, you are choosing to witness to definitions you have given to everything. In other words, you are trying to enjoy a position of authorship that was never given to you. And therefore you can't have, even though you can imagine you have it and make commitment to that imagination and thereby create a belief that you believe. When the word belief is used, it's not a very strong word. When you hear of a person's beliefs, you recognize immediately by the choice of words that they're not anchored in anything eternal, because beliefs change. But when you say, I believe this, you give more substance to it in your mind. And what you believe becomes important. And you want everyone else to honor what you believe. In fact, you want everyone else to believe what you believe so that you can feel as though your belief really is meaningful. Nothing that you have refused to accept, including the allness of God and the godness of all, can be brought into your awareness. Your refusal is absolute and will govern your perception until you modify your refusal.